When you think of Mercedes and motorsports, the infamous Silberpfeiler undoubtedly come to mind. From the pre-war Grand Prix beasts that tore up the daunting racetracks like Aarhus or Bremgarten, to the F1 streamliner of the mid-50s, the Mille Miglia 300 SLR, the mighty DTM machines, the old McLaren Mercedeses, or the modern F1 hybrid championship winners. The brand has been very successful in almost every motorsport they entered in. They even won a Dakar rally in 1983. When it comes to sports car racing though, and more specifically Le Mans, the story becomes a bit more difficult. Mercedes did win the 1952 race with the 300 SL driven by Hermann Lang and Fritz Ries, but the Le Mans disaster of 1955 took away all of that shine. Mercedes pulled out of motorsports altogether after that, only returning to La Sarthe 30 years later as an engine supplier to Swiss privateer Sauber. The beginning of that partnership got off on the wrong foot, with a Sauber Mercedes having a big crash during practice, flipping over on the Mulsanne Straight. This accident is very much forgotten by most race fans, but the similarities on what would happen decades later is just too eerie. Of course, this was a Sauber design car, but still it had Mercedes links. Redemption would follow in the end, as both Sauber and Mercedes were rewarded for their tenacity and did win the 1989 edition with the fully factory-backed C9. Further outings in 1990 and 91 didn't yield any big results at La Sarthe, and both parties started to focus on F1 after that. Mercedes did make a comeback to the famous endurance race in 1998 after a very successful season in FIA GT the year before. The all-new CLK LM was an evolution of the already beastly CLK GTR and was very quick from the off. It romped to an easy pole position in the hands of Mercedes stalwart Bernd Schneider. The race, however, proved to be a very different affair, and both Mercs retired after a mere 19 and 31 laps respectively. To make matters worse, their Stuttgart colleagues Porsche romped to a relatively easy 1-2 finish. Mercedes did get revenge by sweeping the FIA GT series where it won all 10 races. This total dominance led to its competitors pulling out of the series though, and the collapse of the GT1 category. Because of this, the Le Mans race organizers, the ACO, created a new category for top-line cars, the LM GTP. It was very similar to the GT1 rules, but with a bit more flexibility when it comes to homologation. Most importantly, manufacturers now didn't have to produce a road-going version anymore of their race car. This gave Mercedes' designer Gerhard Ungar basically a free hand to pen up a fully bespoke car to conquer Le Mans once again. The all-new CLR was lighter than its predecessor, the cockpit smaller, and the overall height compared to the CLK LM 10 cm shorter. Aerodynamically, it was much more refined with a flatter nose and longer overhangs due to a shorter wheelbase. Clearly, the emphasis was placed on a low drag setup for maximum top speed. Mercedes still managed to retain its brand image with the reuse of the CLK class taillights and the grille and headlights from the then newly launched CL model. After racking up some good testing mileage, Mercedes deemed the CLR ready for the 1999 Le Mans event. 3 cars were entered, with the most notable drivers being Nick Heidfeld, Peter Dambreck, Ben Schneider and a young Mark Webber. During the qualifying sessions, there was a big scare for the Australian in his Nr.4 car, as he suffered a major accident when running behind another car over the small crest on the part between Mulsanne and Indianapolis. The nose of the Mercedes simply took off and the car did a full backflip, landing heavily on the left rear corner. Webber luckily escaped any injury, but was understandably left shaken and bruised. Since Mark was relatively unharmed and the accident took place in an area of the track where there is no general public access and no TV cameras at the time, the incident was simply deemed as a freak one-off occurrence. The damaged Nr.4 car would be repaired in time, and Webber also recovered to still enter the race later that week. During the warm-up session on the morning of the race, incredibly, the same thing happened again. And again it was a Nr.4 car driven by Mark Webber, but now over the big crest at the end of the Mulsanne Straight. The CLR flipped over and landed heavily on the back and skidded on its roof into the runoff just before Mulsanne corner. The TV cameras only caught the aftermath, but some photographers, however, did capture the whole incident. Images of the Mercedes hanging 9 meters above the ground were just spine-chilling and eerily similar to what happened with the Sauber Mercedes C8 of John Nielsen all these years ago. Mark again got out relatively unscathed, but understandably refused to drive the car again. Mercedes pulled the Nr.4 car from the race anyways, as there was not enough time to repair the car before the start. The drivers of the other two cars were consulted but were ready to race on. Only Christophe Bouchu of the number 5 entry voiced his concerns on the car showing a light front end but also decided to race. Incredibly, Mercedes instructed its drivers not to follow other cars too closely. In the meantime, the team also contacted Adrian Newey, the then McLaren Mercedes chief aerodynamicist, for advice on modifying the remaining CLRs to prevent further incidents. Newey told the team to withdraw the cars immediately, but his advice fell on deaf ears. The Mercedes team then simply added canards to the side of the nose for added downforce, thus sacrificing a bit of top speed. In the early running of the race, the two remaining CLRs both completed a first full stint without any issues. After these first driver swaps, Schneider, who had just handed the number 6 car to Franck Lagorce, reported that the car was running well and didn't encounter any issues. On lap 76 though, disaster struck again. The number 5 car of Peter Dambrek was racing the Toyota GT1 for second place. Contrary to the so-called safety instructions, the Mercedes was right behind the Toyota as they exited Mulsanne Corner on the way to Indianapolis. At the very same spot that Mark Webber had his first flying accident, the same occurred to Dambrek. The CLR clipped the inside curb, lifting its front wheels off the ground over the small rise. The Merc flipped over at full speed, quickly rotated 3 times and flew at a height of over 15 meters straight off the track, over the barriers into the forest next to the road. Incredibly, the car missed all of the trees and crashed down into an area that had just been cut down. The heavy impact forced the tree limb into the monocoque, penetrating into the cockpit just behind the driver's seat. Dambrek was initially knocked unconscious, but managed to climb out of the wrecked Mercedes himself. Just like Mark Webber, he escaped relatively unharmed, although he didn't have any memory of the crash at the time. Since this part of the racetrack is ran on what is usually a public road, Dambrek was given a breathalyzer test by the French gendarmerie, I kid you not. As the crash was broadcast live for the world to see, Mercedes had no option to pull the remaining number 6 car from the race. The garages were quickly shut and the brand quietly left the track with its tail between its legs. Mercedes never raced at Le Mans ever since, but they have just recently announced they will return to La Sarthe for 2025, entering cars in the LMGT3 category. Given their fraud history at this racetrack, let's hope this time they manage to keep their cars grounded and write a new, more positive chapter. This 1999 Mercedes CLR Le Mans model is now released by Spark in scale 1/18. They first released this number 4 car, and the other two ones will be available soon, I guess. As you can see, I went for the number 4 car of Gounon, Tiemann and Mark Webber. And this of course is the car that flipped over twice and didn't race in the end due to Webber's crash in the warm-up session. I also have the Dambrek version still on pre-order, as that one is the car that I actually saw flying live on TV. Not sure if I'll keep both models then, but yeah, we'll see. Come to think of it, I don't think that Spark ever produced a 1/18th Le Mans model car of a car that actually didn't race, but yeah, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So now all 3 cars are more or less the same, but for the numbers and the drivers' names on the doors and the colors of the mirrors. The only slight different model is this number 4 Webber car that does flipped during the warm-up session, and this one doesn't feature the canards on the front, as these were only mounted on the cars because of that crash, and of course it was withdrawn from the actual race itself. I think it's pretty cool that Spark took notice and didn't just blindly use the same mold for all 3 cars. I mean, I know some other brands that would. Now, this actually isn't the first time Spark have released a 1/18th version of this CLR. They made one back in 2023 for the Low Collection Museum in Germany. It came in bespoke packaging and the model was limited to 100 pieces only. There are a few differences between this edition and the recent release, and this is due to the fact that it seems the Low Collection model is based on the very car that is on display at the museum in the condition it is in. This would explain the yellow headlights, the see-through top part of the number plates with the Le Mans banner on it, or the lack of the Le Mans LMGTP participant stickers on the air intake and roof. The only difference then on the low model compared to the real museum car are the sidewalls of the tires, which have Dunlop stickers and some extra markings as well on some of the wheels, even though the original tires would of course be Bridgestones. So this new release then is based on the Le Mans cars as they were back in 1999, with the clear headlights, the full white car numbers, participant stickers on the roof and Bridgestone tires. Other than that, I think both Spark-made models are the same. Another brand then I never heard of, called Ivy Merit Models, have also made several versions of this car a few years ago now. They made the number 4, 5 and 6 cars, but also a clean all silver grey car with red mirrors. And this one is probably a test version, I think. However, it then wrongly features the canards, just like the number 4 car. Now, I've never seen one in the flesh, so it's hard to say what the quality is like. These models don't look too bad and come on a fancy leather base. However, judging from the pictures that are floating around, I'd say the Spark version looks a tiny bit better. Normally now I do the unboxing segment where I talk about the packaging style. Since this version doesn't have a special box, I'll just refer to the other recent Spark model reviews I've done. The boxes are all the same now, so no need to reiterate this every time. So now in this segment I obviously should be saying something bad about this model then. Well, if I really have to say something negative, maybe then the fact that it's a sealed model. But yeah, since it's a Spark resin model, you could expect that it doesn't feature any opening parts though, so that's not even a real con. But okay, then maybe these clamps for the body panels, like the nose section or the engine cover, are not very detailed. I mean, they certainly aren't bad, but a fine photo etched piece here would look a lot nicer, I think. Another thing then is the decal used for the driver's names on the top of the doors. The outline of the decal is a bit too noticeable, but I mean, that's really about it for the negatives, I guess. But let's just move on to the positives now and marvel at this gorgeous model car. And let's start with the overall look of this model car. I think it simply looks stunning. The car itself was a real beauty too, of course, but Spark really did it justice. Just compared to that Ivy models version, and this one simply looks better, I think, and is also more accurate. As I mentioned before, I love Spark's attention to detail. Since this is a number 4 car that didn't start the race, it doesn't feature the canards on the side of the nose. As you can see from the samples of the other cars, they are present on those models. Since we're looking at the front, I'll point out the very nice detailing on the headlights, the big typical grille with the Mercedes star in it, the fine Mercedes badge on the nose, and these very refined rings and tow hooks on the car's splitter. The look from the front of the car is also amazing, just look how flat and how low it is. These two big intakes then into the door tunnels look great, with a nice mesh texture blocking it off. The detailing on the windscreen is really good too, with this beautiful asymmetrical split grille in front, and then a very fine windshield wiper placed in the middle of it. On the left side of the cockpit then there is a fine engine cut-off red pull ring. The rivet detailing on the top part here and on the window contour is a nice added detail too. On the right side of the car, in the door number plates, there is the valve for the air hose that activates the inboard jack system. I also really like this glossy sand grey discolored part on the lower part of the wheel arch behind the front wheels. The large opening underneath these doors is nicely modeled too, and you can see the back of the front wheels through them. The cockpit then is quite small and therefore visibility inside is not too good. The parts you can see though look decent. There are fine decals on the dashboard to be spotted. The seat has 3D red belts on them with nice photo etched buckle parts. The steering wheel and the gear stick lever look good, and the separation wall with the engine bay looks really good, I think, in this textured golden yellow carbon. Behind the driver's area you'll notice a headrest cushion and an impact structure on the side, which I guess would have been a very much used safety feature in this particular car. On the side window then some rivet detailing is again present, and the addition of these red, white and black stickers is just brilliant. I don't know what they could mean, but they are also differently orientated on either side of the cockpit. If you then look at the side windows from the back, you'll notice that there are actually these sort of cooling slits, I guess. Another nice touch on this area of the model. The top of the doors then have the driver's names on it, and the right side mirror of the car has this extra decal. This is supposed to be an extra light that the CLRs carried. On the top of the cockpit there is the large air intake with the Le Mans participants' scrutineering stickers on it, and this arrangement of fine antennas. On the right side of the roof only there are these panel lines for a round-shaped lid. The fuel filler holes on both sides are not massively detailed, but look nice enough. This indent for the door handles then is also a very cool small detail. The back of the engine cover then flows nicely into this big, like half circle intake in the middle. On either side of it there are two large NACA ducts as well, and the mesh visible inside of those intakes look good and adds to the realism. The large rear wing then is nicely decked out in this black glossy carbon fiber texture. The small gurney flap on top, and especially the fine support pillars just look amazing. Those tiny rings next to it are also just next level, I think. The wing then towers over the very low back end of the car. The CLK taillights give the car that typical Mercedes look and are very nicely modeled. The exhaust then exit next to those lights with this nice chrome heat shield rings around the outlet holes in the engine cover. In the middle then there is a big radiator split in two pieces. The mesh used here looks very refined, as does the rather large red tow hook ring. The diffuser is rather simple but still adds to the dramatic look of this car. Finally then, the wheels look great too, I think. The tires have Bridgestone branding on them, although a lot of pictures of the real car had the tires with no branding on them, so I don't know if it's entirely correct, but it looks good at least. The rims are nicely modeled too, shame that the tire valves are missing on this model though. The wheel nuts then certainly don't look too bad. They are all in this metallic blue color and the same on all four wheels. There is a bit of brake detailing visible through the spokes of the rims then. The actual discs look like they are carbon fiber. And the calipers look good too with the yellow AP branding on them. This Mercedes CLR model is an absolute belter then from Spark in my opinion. They really did a terrific job recreating this fabulous flawed racer. From the overall looks to the finer details, this model has it all. I'm looking forward to seeing the number 5 car I ordered too and put them side by side to see if there are any other differences aside from the canards on the nose. Now, would I recommend you getting one? Well, it depends a bit on if you like sports cars models too. If you do, then don't hesitate getting your hands on one of these. Maybe wait for the other versions if you prefer any drivers of the other cars, or if you want to have the car that made such headlines in the 1999 edition of Le Mans. So this concludes my review of this Spark Resin 1/18 Mercedes CLR model. Thanks a lot for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and check out the other content as well, like, this video here. In the meantime, take care and I'll see you again in the next one.